2 a.m., the East China Sea was eerily silent. Not a sound could be heard except for the waves crashing against the steel hull of the USS Ronald Reagan, the massive American nuclear-powered aircraft carrier patrolling about 170 miles off the coast of Taiwan. Above FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jets flew regular patrols. Beneath the surface, a Virginia-class submarine lurked like a ghost. On the water's surface, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers formed a steel shield around the flagship. But no one knew. The nightmare had already begun. Deep inside mainland China, a DF-21D ballistic missile nicknamed the Carrier Killer is rolled out of its silo. No announcement, no warning. The launch order is given. A blazing streak of fire tears through the night, leaving behind a twisting column of white smoke. Elsewhere, an H-6 strategic bomber takes off from an airbase near Fujian, carrying long-range KD-21 cruise missiles. At the same time, a salvo of YJ-21 hypersonic missiles is fired from a Type 055 destroyer. No one had time to react. There was no warning signal, only a deadly silence before the storm. On the command deck of the USS Ronald Reagan, the Aegis radar system detected the first red blips just 5 seconds after the missile launched. Alarms sounded. The entire ship shifted into combat mode. Bells rang and red warning lights flashed intensely. The officers in control hurriedly determined the missile's trajectory, speed, approach direction, and type. In less than a minute, the peaceful life on the ship turned into a high-speed nightmare. It was no longer a routine patrol. The quiet jokes in the dining room were gone. All that remained were orders, tactics, and life-or-death calculations. A chilling question immediately arises: was this an unintended accident? Or was it the first shot that ignited a historic conflict between two superpowers? For many years, the U.S.-China tensions in the South China Sea have smoldered like hot embers beneath the sand. Warships have come dangerously close, aircraft have nearly collided, and heated exchanges have repeatedly surfaced at the United Nations agenda. But never before, never once has China dared to actually pull the trigger. Until now. And the most frightening part of all is that no one knows what will happen next. Is it just a warning, a tactical accident, or a deliberate act to test Washington's response? Or worse, is this the opening shot of a global war on a scale the modern world has never seen before? The DF-21D ballistic missile has exited the atmosphere and is diving toward its target at hypersonic speed. At the same time, from an H-6 bomber, the KD-21 cruise missile launches flying around layers of defensive radar through an ultra-low orbit. Beneath the sea surface, Chinese warships fire a salvo of YJ-21 missiles weapons known as mobile scalpels, skimming just above the water to avoid detection. Three-pronged attacks from the sky, the sea, and space are converging into a coordinated strike aimed directly at the United States' top symbol of power in the Pacific, the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan. This is not a drill. This is not a warning. This is a real strike executed with a strategy calculated down to the very second. A model defense system. But is it enough? Inside Reagan's Combat Command Center, the officers on duty shouted out each line of code. The Aegis radar system had locked onto the target. In less than 10 seconds, the SM-6, the U.S. Navy's most advanced interceptor missile, was launched from the vertical launch system VLS tubes. Next are the ESSM missiles, a type of short-range missile specialized in destroying fast and highly maneuverable targets. The surrounding destroyers also joined the battle one after another. Each ship was not only a firepower unit, but also a crucial link in the integrated defense network. If the U.S. defense system were a net This is the moment it stretched to its fullest extent, ready to block the oncoming storm of destruction. But theory and practice are two completely different things. The sophistication of China's tactics. The DF-21D missile is not an ordinary ballistic missile. After exiting the atmosphere, it uses a maneuverable re-entry vehicle MARV, a warhead capable of maneuvering during re-entry. This makes predicting its flight path extremely difficult, even for advanced radar systems. At the same time, the YJ-21 missiles skimmed just 16 to 33 feet above the sea surface. They flew in a dispersed formation, executing sharp maneuvers in the final phase to deceive the air defense system. KD-21, a long-range cruise missile equipped with a penetrating warhead, is launched from the H-6 bomber at a distance of over 310 miles, well beyond the interception range of most escort fighters. Everything is calculated to create a tactical overload, forcing Aegis and U.S. defense weapon systems to make a choice which threat to intercept first and which to sacrifice afterward. The digital battle, where the one who sees ahead wins. But China is not just fighting with missiles. In the darkness of the night sky, a digital battle has also begun. Before the missiles even leave the launch pad, a series of cyber attacks are launched against the navigation and sensor systems of the U.S. Carrier Strike Group. The radar experienced interference for a few seconds. Some systems displayed conflicting data. The GPS signal receiving stations entered an undefined state. It was an extremely brief period, just 30 seconds, but in the military world, 30 seconds is enough time for a missile to travel over 155 miles. The operations room urgently activated the backup system. But clearly, China had thoroughly studied every link in the U.S. defense chain, and they knew exactly where the weak points were. The USS Ronald Reagan responds like a seasoned warrior. While the combat officers handled the interception orders, the entire ship was switched to general quarters mode. Every crew member, from radar technicians to firefighters, took their positions. The fire suppression system was activated, and all watertight doors were securely closed. A YJ-21 missile broke through the outermost defense layer, heading straight toward the starboard side of the Reagan. Immediately, the CIWS, the 20mm Phalanx Gatling gun, whirred like a steel saw. Its radar-guided targeting system tracked the missile, firing 4,500 rounds per minute. Metal bullet tracers tore through the missile at a distance of just a few hundred yards. Debris fell into the sea landing less than 165 feet from the flight deck. But that was just one of dozens of missiles heading their way. For the first time in over 70 years, a U.S. aircraft carrier has been damaged by enemy fire. Although most were shot down, one KD-21 missile with a penetrative warhead got through. It struck near the rear of the ship, where the aircraft elevator system operates. The explosion created a massive fireball that shook the entire hull. The flight deck was scorched, and some fighter jets preparing for takeoff were damaged. Many sailors were injured by the shock waves. However, the ship did not sink. There was no collapse. The U.S. Navy has trained for this scenario thousands of times. The emergency response team rushed into the fire, extinguishing each hotspot and cutting off the spread of flammable gases. The automatic cooling system sprayed CO2 smoke. The medical unit provided first aid immediately in the operations lobby. The atmosphere was no longer chaotic. It was replaced by a cold determination. And then, while the smoke was still rising, the U.S. Navy began its counterattack. The EA-18G Growler takes off, deploying electronic warfare to jam enemy radar. The F-35 swiftly launches from the auxiliary flight deck, carrying AGM-158 JAO SSM cruise missiles. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer fires Tomahawk missiles, targeting a suspected area housing DF-21D launch platforms. A Virginia-class submarine which had been monitoring the waters near the Hainan base for several days received an operational signal. The engine slowed down. The torpedo hatch opened. Target coordinates were uploaded. The war has entered a new chapter, and now the entire Pacific Fleet is awakening. The explosion had just ended on the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier when the entire surrounding sea suddenly fell into a suffocating silence filled with tension. Black smoke still billowed from the deck, and the alarm sirens continued to echo throughout the compartments. But now the only sound that rang out clearly was the order to counterattack. No meeting is necessary, no arguments needed. The U.S. Navy's Forward Command, based in Yokosuka, Japan, has raised the entire strike group to the highest level of war alert. The Tomahawk launchers on the USS Higgins destroyer were activated. The missiles soared at supersonic speeds toward the Spratly Islands, where intelligence had identified mobile radar sites used by China to guide DF-21D missiles. This is not an emotional retaliation. Every target was carefully selected control centers, launch vehicles, radar stations, and logistics facilities. No attacks on civilians, no random destruction, only absolute precision. The U.S. Air Force enters the battle. The sky is no longer peaceful. From Guam Island, a pair of strategic B-1B Lancer bombers were ordered to take off. Within just 3 hours after China's initial strike, the bomber squadron had flown into the extended approach zone over the South China Sea, carrying a series of AGM-158 JAS-SMER missiles, precision GPS-guided weapons capable of hitting targets from over 560 miles away. In Okinawa, F-22 Raptor squadrons have been placed on combat alert. These stealth fighters are tasked with infiltrating and neutralizing the S-400 air defense radar systems that China has deployed near the coastline. On the deck of the Reagan, despite being damaged, it remained operational. The auxiliary flight control system was activated. With the coordination of the USS Shiloh destroyer, the Reagan was still able to maintain limited takeoff and landing operations. The F/A-18 Super Hornet and F-35C are deployed to conduct electronic warfare, suppress enemy air defenses, and protect the airspace for the main airstrike missions. Virginia-class submarine strikes. A blow emerging from the depths of the ocean. Beneath the ocean's surface, where humans cannot see, the most dangerous counterattack has begun. The Virginia-class fast attack submarine, which had been patrolling the waters south of Hainan Island for several days, has now received orders to take action. Intelligence reports indicate that 2 Type 052D destroyers and a UN-class submarine are operating near the area where the KD-21 missile was previously launched. Maintaining complete radio silence, the Virginia-class submarine opened its launch tubes. 2 heavy Mk-48 torpedoes were fired. Just 4 minutes later, the sensor system detected a significant heat signal. An underwater explosion had occurred. A Chinese ship was hit. No announcements, no statements, only deadly silence beneath the deep ocean. Electronic warfare, the invisible battlefield in cyberspace. Not only fighting with live ammunition, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command's Cyber Operations Division has quietly launched the Blind Dragon campaign, a series of electronic counterattacks targeting the PLA's fire control systems. The objective is to jam GPS signals, disrupt communications within China's C4ISR command networks, and especially to mislead domestic communication satellites. Within seconds, the surveillance radars stationed on Pichu Lam Island and Chu Thap Reef began receiving abnormal data. This is a crucial part of the counterattack, cutting off the enemy's eyes and ears. If the enemy can't see, they can't shoot accurately. U.S. allies join in. A multinational campaign begins to take shape. A few hours after the strike on the Reagan, Japan called an emergency meeting. The Japan Maritime Self-Defense Forces Aegis ships were redeployed heading south. PAC-3 missile defense systems were deployed throughout Okinawa. Australia is also getting involved. From the Tyndall Air Force Base, KC-30A tanker aircraft are preparing to refuel U.S. forces in the air. A Hobart-class destroyer, which was stationed in Darwin, immediately left the port heading toward the South China Sea, ready to join the integrated combat network. In Seoul, the president of South Korea made an official statement. If the security of our American ally is threatened, South Korea cannot stand aside. The South Korean Air Force has placed its entire fleet of F-15K fighter jets on high alert. In Manila, the Philippine government has opened the Subic and Clark bases, allowing U.S. aircraft to take off and land without restrictions. The Philippine Navy has also deployed a series of patrol vessels around the Spratly Islands. An informal alliance is taking shape, and China is beginning to find itself strategically encircled. Intelligence and counterattack, striking the enemy's brain. While all attacks are focused on the weapons and radar systems, a more sophisticated campaign is underway in the rear, a silent war targeting the PLA's command system. From Fort Meade, the U.S. National Security Agency NSA, in coordination with Cyber Command, launched an attack on China's military communication data systems. The objective is to mislead by creating ghost data, false information that makes the Chinese air defense units believe there are as many as 10 U.S. aircraft squadrons attacking from the east, while the actual attack is coming from the west. Within just a few hours, the entire operational structure of the PLA became disrupted. Some units unilaterally changed positions, while others temporarily lost communication. China realized that they were facing an opponent far superior in information coordination and tactical response capabilities. The battle is far from over, but the dynamics have already shifted. At this moment, the world is holding its breath. The Reagan is still afloat, damaged, but not sunk. The escort warships have begun forming a protective perimeter, and the radar systems are gradually being restored after the cyber attack. Beneath the sea, American submarines continue their relentless pursuit. In the skies, squadrons of American and Allied jet fighters dominate the airspace. The U.S. counterattacks are not just acts of retaliation, they are strategic moves to shift the balance of the battle. It was at that very moment that a new question arose at the Pentagon and in Beijing. If this isn't total war yet, then where exactly is the line between war and peace now? In less than 12 hours since the first missile struck, the USS Ronald Reagan, the entire Indo-Pacific region has transformed into a global strategic emergency zone. Warships, aircraft, satellites, and radar systems all have been put on combat alert. But this confrontation is no longer just between two ships or two fleets. It has become a battle of wits between two superpowers, with consequences that extend far beyond the boundaries of the South China Sea. China declared that it was an act of self-defense against an infringement of sovereign territory. The United States responded by calling it an unacceptable act of aggression, forcing Washington to respond in order to protect its allies, safeguard freedom of navigation, and maintain global credibility. The United Nations held an emergency meeting. NATO did not make any commitments, but began deploying naval forces in the Indian Ocean. Oil prices surged. Stock markets plummeted. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see who would blink first. And the scary thing is, no one might even blink. Once a weapon has been launched, all political options become chaotic. If the U.S. de-escalates, it would send a dangerous signal to the entire alliance system. If China does not stop, the risk of nuclear confrontation will no longer be theoretical. We are living in an era where a single wrong decision, a misunderstood signal, or even just one wayward missile could ignite the entire Asia-Pacific region into flames. This is not just the story of admirals or presidents. It is the responsibility of all humanity to prevent war before there is no turning back.